So the purpose of this webinar is to present some models and ways to reduce the chances of having dropped object on offshore installations through the review of 3D models and design review in general. So this, if you have any questions throughout the presentation, you can just pause the presentation and post your question at the forum, either YouTube or LinkedIn or something similar. We also have our monthly attendance of the Wales Forum that anyone is welcome to attend. So starting with just introduce myself, I'm the Vice President for Axess. I'm based in Singapore, and I'm responsible for Asia Pacific and Middle East. So just a quick introduction of Axess. So we are a global player. We are originated from Norway. We're in the offshore oil and gas environment. There are very challenges of potential dropped object due to the challenges in the North Sea. And expanding globally, we've managed to introduce the dropped object prevention program into several different locations with different regulations. And hence, we've actually found new ways of reducing that risk in the novel models. So the Axess Group has 4 main arms. So today, we're going to focus on the drops management under the asset integrity management arm. We also have another solution specifically to avoid dropped object, which is a software solution called eDrops, which is a way to use tablets and databases management to reduce dropped object. On the holistic view of what we call the improvement loop, we have on the left the phases of a field development for an offshore field oil and gas project. And ideally, we should always start as early as possible with any identification of improvements. On each of these phases, we have developed the equivalent services on the right side on how to reduce the likelihood of a dropped object during the operations. And in the concept and design phase, you see a few of the services that we've been offering related to drops. The first one we call a drop strategy, which is basically a high-level workshop for a corporate level on how to fight dropped objects, checking the best practices, which guidelines will be used, what are the targets for the company. So it's more on the high-level dashboard and benchmarking and etc. The drops philosophy, it can be a fleet or asset-specific philosophy, and this will define further which standards, and then going more specific into the procedures, and then defining the criticality of each area. What is the low risk area? What's the high risk area? That will also allow to have a more specific approach to reduce the risks of a potential dropped object based on the real cases and then the criteria that's being defined on by the competent people, rather than just relying on the subjective classification of an inspector that can be very different in one side of the world to the other, depending on the background, depending on the history. So that is to allow a more standardization. Another example is the boating philosophy that's been also very specific. So boats has been a major source of dropped object in the industry. Of course, in the marine life, we have a very corrosive environment. So then making sure that this is being used at the correct specification, the correct length, and then the application is correct, how we are preventing them from falling, can actually prevent significant rework, significant number of findings later on, if this is given the right material and so on. Also in the terms of supply chain, especially for new installations or in the yard phase or usually in a SPS or something similar, then we have to also make sure that the information of the specification of the material that it's being purchased, either items that will be installed at height, or in the case of the boats, this specification is actually providing accordingly to the supplier. So what we don't want is to have a very nice philosophy for the boating, for drops, but then the items that are purchased are not up to standard. So then there could be a wrong material that will lead to galvanic corrosion, or not being the correct dimensions and so on, or the right method, the right specification. So we sometimes assist in getting this information how to specify to the suppliers as well. And then the purpose, I think, of this presentation, we'll delve in more in details, is the showing some examples on how to apply the 3D model review and then design review in general. And the goal here is to have an early identification to try to get design improvements. So this is a way to identify systematic errors that we've identified in operation, repetitive types of findings, and how can we implement in the hierarchy of control to ideally eliminate the risk altogether, or at least reduce the potential, or having something more systematic rather than just having the same findings over and over again, only found in offshore operations. So here are some examples that we've actually found and suggested to some of the clients. This is of course, in a 3D model. That's the ideal world. And some of the changes that we've suggested that we could identify. Of course, the 3D model has its challenges that sometimes is not detailed enough. But in this case, we've suggested to add handrails and guardrails, swing gates. So then we make sure that everything is in a safe and avoids the dropped object as well. Other example, including the relocation of items so they can be outside of the line of fire. So by removing and just simply relocating a few centimeters, they can actually be the probability of being hit by a moving object that will be reduced. So dynamic drops are the major source of findings and issues on offshore, and this is a kind of one example of a simple design improvement that could significantly reduce the risks later on. Another one was just simply rotating, so it does not leaving even moving. Of course, this could create some need for reassessing the studies, illumination studies, and so on. But in this case, we found that just by simply rotating, we could still get this improved and removed out of the line of fire for the BOP hoisting equipment. But we also have the reality of drilling rigs nowadays are mostly built already. We don't have the luxury of actually getting 3D model reviews on drilling rig sites nowadays. So how do we do with existing rigs? How can we apply the same mentality, the same philosophy of checking design improvement on an existing rig? So then for this, we've actually developed on the operations phase of the project something called reverse drops survey, where you can see on the right. And that model that we've coined, or that name that we've coined, is to basically go around an existing unit and ask some simple and obvious questions, but more on the design improvement, or at least on a more systematic improvement, rather than just going there and installing a secondary retention or safe securing, and we're just gonna get this secured, but not necessarily removing or reducing the risk altogether. So what is this equipment doing up there? So we go around and ask these kind of things. Can we actually, how is it connected to the superstructure? Is that following the standards? Is that, how are the other rigs? If you have a sister rig, was this maybe improved in the other one? Can we move this item to a safer location? Can we get something lighter? So as we know, the amount of energy can be a significant risk when this falls. So just by removing the energy, that can reduce the risk that maybe goes from high to medium or even to low. And the technology has improved. The prices of a new and improved equipment have lowered. So then we use this reverse drop survey to ask this kind of questions. Maybe there is something better. Can we potentially remove the item at height altogether? Sometimes it was left there. No one really knows. No one is sure why. No one has asked that question. So we go around and start asking and questioning everything that can be questioned. So show some examples here. So this was an eye bolt on a pump that was in the crane. And then this is usually used only for lifting during construction. So just by removing this eye bolt and maybe just storing in a safe place, we can actually remove one potential dropped object if this comes loose. So this is the kind of a practical approach that we take. Some other things that is gaps between toe boards. Maybe it was done. Maybe there was a design improvement that could have been done in the construction. It was not done, but we still need to address. Or maybe something just cracked and it didn't seem a big thing, but with this small design change, we can also avoid potential dropped object to the items below or going overboard. This is one example of getting a new technology, or that it's getting cheaper and more affordable for lighting fixtures. So with the LED technology, we can actually reduce the weight significantly of the lighting fixtures at height. This is a very common occurrence on drilling rigs and on offshore installations. So then, of course, depending on capex and budget, we understand all of these challenges, but this is the right time to ask these questions. Can we make the items at height lighter to reduce the energy stored in there? Can we get some new technology that maybe already comes with better securing methods, or just lighter? We even have that case that we've identified that were too many lighting fixtures. So then we recommended to remove and relocate some. So then by removing items altogether, we eliminate the risk of that item completely falling. So in this case, we've actually ran the illumination survey as well. We measured that even if we remove some of the lighting, we just turn them off, and then we measured the light, it was still according to the standards, illumination standards, and then by that we removed several floodlights. Maybe it was just installed, and then another project was installed temporarily, and so we could actually start asking these kind of questions. This was a cable tray that actually had not been used, so I think there was some kind of system that were decommissioned, and no one thought of removing. And then we just went there, find something that doesn't seem to be used, and okay, why don't we remove these cable trays altogether, as we know cable trays can be a source of dropped object as well. Okay, so that concludes the short presentation, and I encourage you to post questions here in this forum, whether you're on LinkedIn or YouTube. If you can also reach out to Drops Asia. I'm also welcome. I'm putting also my contact details here, and thank you for watching this presentation. Have a nice day.
Thank you for watching this video. We hope you found it informative. Please consider subscribing to this channel to receive notifications of future videos. Also consider watching the videos on the right.